If you've been staring at that shady corner of your yard thinking, well, that's a lost cause, I've got good news. Even with just a few hours of sunlight, you can still pull in impressive harvests. I've spent plenty of seasons working around tall buildings and big trees. Here's the plan. We'll walk through 20 vegetables that either do really well in part shade or tolerate it just fine. So let's begin. The first on the list is chard, known as the set-it-and-forget-it workhorse for shady corners. Give it a spot with softer light and it just keeps on going, almost like a perennial you can snack on. The routine is simple. Come through with your scissors, clip a few outer leaves, leave the center alone, and it'll keep pushing fresh growth. If you've ever wanted a leafy green that forgives a busy week or 3, this is the one. And yes, it can get impressively large when it's happy. A quick seed tip that saves head scratching. What looks like a single chard seed is actually a cluster. Inside that big corky seed are multiple seeds, which means you'll often see 2 or more seedlings pop up from one planting hole. Totally normal. Once they're up, you can carefully thin to the strongest plant, or let a couple grow together if you've got the room and want extra leaves. Either approach works, just don't be surprised by the bonus sprouts. As for getting started, you've got options. Chard is easy to direct sow right where it will live, especially in a bed that gets partial shade and stays a touch cooler. If you like control and a neat transplant schedule, it also starts well indoors and settles into the garden without fuss. It's a naturally cold-tolerant plant, which is part of why it shines in less intense light. No stress about scorching afternoons. And can we talk about the color? Chard brings a little party to the shade. You've got ruby reds, sunny yellows, clean whites, and those rainbow mixes that make a bed look like stained glass. The color isn't just a pretty face either. You're harvesting broad, tender leaves that cook down beautifully or anchor a hearty salad. Clip what you need, let it rebound, and repeat. That's the whole rhythm. If a grow bag or forgotten corner has you feeling guilty, slide chard in there. It's forgiving, productive, and cheerful about it. Exactly what a shady space needs. Leaf lettuce is the quick win for low-light beds. It already grows fast, and in part shade it simply slows down a notch. Nothing dramatic. To keep the salads coming, pick varieties with shorter maturity times so you're harvesting sooner rather than later, even with that slight shade delay. Think speedy types that finish in the 35-45 day window instead of the longer 55-plus crowd. Here's where a small strategy shift pays off. Transplant rather than direct sowing in a shady bed. Those first days matter, and seeds can sulk when the soil is cooler and the light is softer. Starting seedlings elsewhere, under lights or in a sunnier nursery spot, lets you set out sturdy little plants that are ready to grow instead of waiting on hesitant sprouts. It's the same space, just a smarter start. Lettuce is shallow-rooted and tender by nature, which actually plays in your favor. Shade keeps the soil a bit cooler and more evenly moist, so the leaves don't scorch or crisp up the moment a warm day shows up. Less wilting drama, more steady growth. That tender texture you love in a salad, shade helps preserve it. Once the plants settle, harvest is as simple as cut a little, come back for more. Take outer leaves regularly and let the center keep pushing new growth. Or clip a section, then move down the row so everything has time to rebound. If you want variety on the plate, tuck a few colors and shapes side by side. Oak leaf, loose romaine types, frilly greens. So every picking looks like a mix. Could you scatter seed right into the shady bed? You can, but expect a slower takeoff and sparser early growth. If patience is your superpower, go for it. If you prefer steady progress, transplants are the calmer path. Either way, keep the soil lightly moist and don't let it bake on that rare hot afternoon. Bottom line, Leaf lettuce is tailor-made for part shade. Fast, forgiving, and delicious. Start strong with transplants, choose quick finishers, and keep snipping. Dinner takes care of itself. Here's a twin bill that doesn't get nearly enough love. Endive and escarole. They're handsome greens, and folded into a mixed salad, they add that pleasant, slightly assertive bite that makes everything else taste more interesting. Better yet, they handle part shade beautifully. Exactly the kind of crop that turns a so-so corner into a steady producer. There's one catch, and it's right at the beginning: patience. Unlike the sprinters of the leafy world, Endive and escarole like to take their time waking up. Their seeds look a bit like tiny satchels, and they can sit for 10 days or more before you see any action. That's why starting them indoors is the calmer path. Give them a reliable setup and a consistent environment, and you'll transplant sturdy little starts instead of fretting over slow, uneven germination outdoors. Once they're settled, they're easy to live with. Part shade keeps them comfortable, growth is steady rather than frantic, and the heads or loose rosettes fill in without you having to hover. If you enjoy a harvest-as-you-need-it rhythm, you can snip outer leaves to stretch the picking window. Prefer a single proud harvest? Let a plant size up and cut the whole head. Your call. Flavor-wise, think about balance. In a bowl with softer lettuces, a handful of endive or escarole leaves gives you texture and a gentle nudge of bitterness that pairs wonderfully with citrus, vinaigrettes, or something creamy. That little lift is what makes a simple salad feel like it came from a good bistro, not just the crisper drawer. Direct sowing is possible, of course, but don't be surprised if the early pace feels pokey in a cool, shaded bed. Transplants just skip the "are we going to sprout today" drama. Keep soil evenly moist, avoid waterlogging, and let that part shade environment do the rest. If your leafy lineup needs variety, and your shade bed needs a willing tenant, endive and escarole are an easy yes. Start them inside, move them out once they're ready, and enjoy a steady stream of beautiful leaves that make every salad a little more special. With all that said, these two might be the most underrated way to upgrade a shady salad patch. Peas are the poster child for spring, and that tells you a lot about why they're comfortable in part shade. Mild sun and cool air keep them happy. Blazing midsummer heat, not so much. In other words, they're a perfect candidate for that softer light bed now, and they can even keep going into early summer if your weather is gentle. When the season really turns up the dial, expect them to slow down or call it quits, and that's normal. Getting them started is pleasantly simple. Pea seeds are stout and satisfying to handle, so go ahead and soak them briefly and direct sow right where they'll climb. They're shallow-rooted, which means two things. They're easy to disturb, and they dry out faster than you think. If you decide to transplant, it can work, but try to move them with minimal root fuss and let them settle without another shuffle. Otherwise, pick a spot, sow, and let them be. Moisture management is the whole game. Keep the soil evenly moist, never swampy, and lay down a little mulch to steady things out. In a shaded bed, you're not fighting evaporation the way you would in full sun, but shallow roots still appreciate a gentle blanket to protect them between waterings. Now, about that climb. Peas use delicate tendrils to latch onto supports, and most of the time, they'll grab your trellis like they were born for it. Occasionally, though, a vine decides life is better flopped out in the aisle. No problem, just nudge it back where it belongs. A few soft ties or small hooks to guide a wandering stem toward the trellis is all it takes, and once it finds a hold, it'll do the rest. Harvest comes in waves. Check daily once flowers show, and pick pods promptly so the plants keep producing instead of putting their energy into seed. The payoff, those sweet, just-picked peas, taste like spring in a bowl. In part shade, they'll still thrive, especially during the cooler window they love. Give them a place to climb, steady moisture, and a little guidance. And peas will make your shadiest corner feel wonderfully productive. Now, if you're finding this video helpful so far, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more gardeners like yourself who would also find it so helpful to avoid these mistakes. All right, let's keep going. The humble radish deserves a second look. Most folks struggle with it not because it's hard to grow, but because they're not sure what to do once it's in the kitchen. Here's the secret. Treat radishes young and keep it simple. Pickle them for crunch and zip, roast the baby roots for a mellow buttery bite, or fold thin slices into a fresh salad mix. Suddenly that "what now" feeling turns into "why didn't I grow more?" Growing wise, radishes are flexible. They'll handle full sun just fine, but if they're getting blasted, they're more likely to bolt on you. In a shadier bed, say that 2 to 4 hour zone, they'll still bulb up. They just take their time. Add roughly a couple of weeks to whatever maturity date you're used to, and you're golden. Truthfully, that slower pace is no big deal. You're putting underused space to work and still coming away with a steady harvest. Part of the fun is the variety. Radishes aren't just the round red picnic type. You've got green lobo with that cool, crisp character, black Spanish with its earthy kick, watermelon radish for that beautiful color pop, benihita for a touch of flair, and then the daikon, which, let's be honest, is hardly humble at all. It's a big, satisfying root that makes you feel like you really accomplished something when you pull it. Planting can be as easy as it gets. Radishes are made for direct sowing. Tuck the seeds in, keep the soil consistently moist, and let the shade take the edge off heat stress. When those roots size up, don't hesitate. Harvest promptly, especially if the weather's warming, so the flavor stays bright and the texture stays snappy. If radishes have ever seemed boring, give them another shot in your low-light bed. With a little patience for that extended finish, you'll be surprised how much you can get from such a small, fast, and versatile crop. It's the sleeper hit of the shade garden. Easy to grow, easy to use, and more delicious options than most people realize. Spinach is the classic shady garden overachiever. It's wonderfully cold tolerant and, yes, a bit heat sensitive. So those softer light conditions are its happy place. Early spring, it's ready to go. Fall sliding into winter, even better. And if summer heat is bearing down, the shade gives spinach a fighting chance to stay tender instead of throwing in the towel. There is one little quirk to know. Spinach takes its sweet time to sprout. For a seed that looks nice and big, it can still sit there for up to 2 weeks before you see action. That's why I like to start spinach from seed indoors. Give it a cozy start, then move sturdy little seedlings out to that shadier bed when they're ready. Your patience at the beginning pays you back with a head start in the garden. Once it's rolling, think steady supply instead of one big harvest. Plant a small batch, then start another a bit later, and keep that rhythm going. Those succession plantings mean you're snipping fresh leaves regularly, rather than waiting on a single crop to finish. It's the easiest way to keep salads lively and omelets happy. And because it's not baking in full, blasting sun, spinach stays more even-keeled in the soil. Cooler beds with gentle light help it stay productive without constant drama. You don't have to baby it, just keep the starts coming. Tuck them into that part-shade bed and enjoy the ongoing cut-and-come-again harvest. Could you sow it directly in the bed? You can, but be ready for that slow start to test your patience. If you're the type who likes seeing progress sooner, starting indoors is the calmest route. Then it's simply a matter of transplanting, watering in, and letting the leaves fill in while you plan your next round. Bottom line, if your garden has only 2 to 4 hours of sun in a spot, spinach is your friend. It fits the cool seasons beautifully. It appreciates the break from heat, and it loves a schedule. Seedlings on deck, harvest in hand, and another batch right behind it. You see what I'm saying? Potatoes aren't the first thing people think of for shade, but they're more tolerant than you'd expect, and they can still pay off nicely. I've even pulled a decent harvest from a shady compost pile where a few old spuds decided to wake up. Not exactly the textbook method, but it worked a bit like a layered lasagna setup, and the plants didn't seem to mind the gentler light one bit. Now, do you need a compost heap to grow them? Not at all. Go ahead and plant in regular soil and let the plants do their thing. In part shade, the growth is steady, and you'll see those plants come into flower when they're getting close to giving you something good. That's your cue. Here's the practical move in a low-light spot. Aim for new potatoes. Once you see those flowers, don't wait around hoping for giant tubers. Shade stretches out the timeline, and the big sizing stage can take longer than it's worth. Instead, slip a hand in the soil and pull a few tender, thin-skinned beauties. They're rich, buttery, and absolutely fantastic in the pan. Harvest around, then recover the base and let the rest keep going if you'd like a second pass. Think of it as shifting the goalposts. Rather than pushing for bulk, you're going for quality and timing. Fresh, smaller potatoes when the plant tells you they're ready. It's a satisfying trade-off that fits a shady bed perfectly. Keep the setup simple. Plant, water, and let the shade keep the soil from drying out too fast. When those blooms show, do a gentle check, harvest what looks good, and enjoy the payoff. If your sunniest beds are already spoken for, potatoes can still earn their keep in the softer light, especially when you lean into that new potato window. That's a sweet spot in the shade. I know, tomatoes and shade don't sound like a match, but a fast-maturing, cold-tolerant bush tomato can absolutely earn its spot in a low-light bed. The key is choosing a determinate variety that's bred for cool starts and quick finishes. Think of names that hint at chilly places. Glacier is a solid example, and anything with a nod to Russia, New York, or Canada usually tells you it's comfortable with colder conditions and a shorter runway. This isn't about squeezing out record-breaking harvests. It's about getting a respectable, satisfying yield where you thought tomatoes were off the table. A compact, determinate plant does its work in a tidy window, sets fruit, and wraps up without demanding months of blazing sunshine. That's exactly the personality you want in part shade. Placement matters. If you've got one bed that gets 2 hours and another that gets 4, the bush tomato gets the 4-hour VIP seat. Save the deeper shade for greens that are perfectly happy there. Spinach can take the gentler spot while your tomato enjoys the best light you can offer. That small upgrade in sun exposure makes a noticeable difference in flower set and ripening. As for care, keep it straightforward. Give the transplant a steady start, water consistently, and let the plant do its thing. In these conditions, you may not get a wall of fruit, but you'll still pick a decent run of tomatoes that taste like summer, without surrendering your prime sunny real estate. The takeaway is simple. Don't write tomatoes off just because you're working with part shade. Pick a quick, cool-friendly determinate. Tuck it into the brightest corner of the bed and let it surprise you. It won't behave like a sprawling summer diva, and that's the point. It's the compact, early finisher that fits the low-light brief and still puts tomatoes on your plate. Bush beans are surprisingly willing in part shade. They won't crank at the same pace as in full sun, but give them the higher end of your shady bed's light and they'll set pods just fine. Think of them as steady players. Compact plants, a clear harvest window, and enough beans to keep the skillet busy without demanding the sunniest spot you own. Here's a setup that proves the point. Picture a vertical tower planted entirely with bush beans. Because only the front half sees the sun at any given time, you simply rotate the tower a half turn each morning. That simple habit evens things out. Yesterday's shaded side becomes today's sunny side. Over a whole month, each face ends up basking roughly half the days. Yet production still rolls in, It's a tidy illustration that beans don't need constant blazing exposure to give you a respectable harvest. On the ground, the same idea applies. If your bed has a brighter edge and a deeper shade side, slide the beans toward the brighter edge and let shade-tough greens occupy the dimmer lanes. That small placement tweak helps flowering and pod fill without changing anything else. Care is pleasantly uncomplicated. Beans don't love wet feet, so water evenly, but avoid soggy soil. In a low-light bed, evaporation is gentler, meaning you can lean toward less frequent, deeper waterings instead of constant spritzing. Keep an eye out as flowers appear. Once pods start forming, a steady rhythm of picking keeps the plant focused on producing more. The harvest routine is simple. Check often and pick young. Tender, slender pods taste best, and frequent harvesting prompts another flush. In part shade, that pick early, pick often approach is your yield multiplier. So if you've been saving beans for your brightest bed, feel free to loosen up. Bush beans can live happily in the higher light end of a shady area, or on a rotated tower where each side gets its turn in the sun. Minimal fuss, compact plants, dependable pods. Exactly the kind of crop that makes a low-light garden feel productive without stealing prime real estate. Time to step into the herb, yes, herb corner. And for my friends across the pond, I'll happily say herbs, with the H. Basil might be famous as a full-sun diva, but here's the twist. It can still do beautifully in part shade, especially when you grow it for flowers, pollinators, or a more ornamental look. In softer light, basil keeps its cool, keeps its shape, and, if you let it bloom, becomes a little pollinator magnet. I've watched bees land, linger, and turn a shady bed into a lively spot. One of my favorites for this job is African blue basil. It behaves like a perennial-style basil, shrugs off a hard haircut, and then surges back like it never missed a beat. I've cut it down twice, and it still bursts with fresh growth. Exactly the sort of resilience you want when your bed doesn't get blasted sun all day. If you're building a shady patch that doubles as a pollinator buffet, this one earns the prime seat. Basil isn't a one-look herb either. Greek columnar basil grows like its name suggests, upright and tidy. Thai basil brings those distinctive, beautiful flower clusters that make the whole corner look composed. A lighter green type like Pesto Propecho brightens the bed, while Tulsi, holy basil, adds its own charming presence. Put a few contrasting kinds together, and suddenly half the bed is basil, each variety doing its part to fill space, attract beneficials, and keep your hands busy with gentle harvests. The routine in shade is simple. Let plants establish, snip as needed, and don't fear a decisive cut when things get leggy. Basil rebounds. You're not forcing it to perform like a sun-baked hedge. You're letting it settle into steady, handsome growth with a bonus buzz of life around the blooms. Bottom line, basil may have a full sun reputation, but in part shade, it's a generous, good-looking tenant. Mix a few varieties, enjoy the flowers, and let the pollinators do their thing. Your shady bed gets color, fragrance, and frequent harvests, without demanding the brightest real estate. If there's one herb that breathes a sigh of relief in part shade, it's cilantro. In hot weather, cilantro's main party trick is bolting, shooting up a flower stalk just when you wanted a handful of leaves for salsa. Tuck it into a shadier section and the whole plant calms down. Growth is slower, yes, but the payoff is more usable leaf and less surprise. I'm a bouquet. If you can find a slow bolt strain, even better, that buys you extra time before it thinks about flowering. Practically speaking, this is one of those set it and snip it situations. Let the plant settle in, then take what you need often. If it's looking a bit scruffy after a warm spell, a tidy trim perks it right up and encourages fresh growth. Shade keeps the soil cooler and the plant focused on leaves instead of launching skyward, which is exactly what you want when tacos are on the menu. Parsley rides along nicely in the same lane. It's not as bolt-happy as cilantro, but it appreciates the softer light and will hold quality leaves without asking much from you. Flat leaf or curly, it's dealer's choice. Both handle the dappled end of the bed with a steady, dependable pace. A quick word on expectations. In the shade, you're trading speed for steadiness. Cilantro and parsley won't sprint, but they won't flame out either. That slower tempo is a blessing when you want a continuous supply instead of a feast-then-famine cycle. Snip outer stems regularly, keep things tidy, and you'll have a standing invitation to garnish just about everything. If the hottest spots in your yard have turned cilantro into a quit-early artist, give it the shady stage. Plant, let it root in, and enjoy a longer window before it thinks about flowers. Parsley, meanwhile, just keeps showing up like the reliable friend it is. Simple, steady, and wonderfully useful. Exactly what a low-light herb corner is for. You see what I'm saying? Green onions are the easygoing allium for shade. Instead of asking a plant to build a big bulb, like your reds, whites, or shallots, green onions give you what you want right up top. Tender leaves you can snip and use tonight. That's why they're a better fit for a low-light bed than bulb onions. Bulb types need all the sun they can get to pack energy underground. In part shade, they just won't size the way you want. Save those for your brightest spot and let the green onions handle the softer corner. In practice, it's as simple as plant it, then clip as needed. Growth will be slower in a shady bed, so think steady trickle rather than big flush. That slower tempo isn't a problem. It just means your harvests are spaced out, and your kitchen gets a consistent supply of fresh, mild onion flavor. Walk out, cut a handful, walk back in. No drama, no waiting on a bulb to finish. If you like a tidy routine, start a small patch and treat it like a living garnish bar. Snip outer leaves, leave the center to keep growing, and the clump will refill. Prefer tuac, cleaner look? Pull a few whole plants, then replant to keep the line moving. Either way, the plant tolerates the shade just fine, and the flavor stays on point. Bright, green, and versatile. Care is uncomplicated. Keep the soil evenly moist. Shade helps here by slowing evaporation. And avoid waterlogging. You're not chasing giant bulbs, so you don't need to push. You're maintaining a friendly little stand that pays you back with quick cuttings for eggs, soups, stir-fries, and salads. Bottom line, in a shady garden, green onions make sense. They skip the sun-hungry bulbing phase and give you easy repeat harvests of that delicious allium bite. Put the bulb onions where they can bask, and let these leafy onions turn your low-light space into a reliable source of fresh flavor. That's it. That's the whole thing. Kale slots neatly into part shade, especially welcome when afternoons run warm. It's happiest when temperatures stay under about 75 degrees trichomes, and a little afternoon protection keeps leaves tender and growth steady. In other words, your dappled or 3 to 4 hour light bed is fair game, with the brighter end of that range giving you the best momentum. Treat it like the cool season staple it is. For spring, start or transplant roughly 4 to 5 weeks before your last frost. For fall, sow again as heat eases. Kale is genuinely cold hardy. Young plants can shrug off a light freeze. So the shoulder seasons are prime time. Give plants room to breathe. Space 8-12 inches apart in rows 18 to 24 inches. If you enjoy baby leaf salads, you can begin cutting in about 25-30 days. For full-size leaves, expect roughly 55-75 days, depending on variety. That spacing is more than a formality. It reduces pest pressure and helps airflow, so leaves stay clean and vigorous. Water and soil needs are straightforward. Consistent moisture and fertile, well-drained soil. In warmer spells, part shade helps curb stress and bitterness, so you get better texture and flavor without forcing the plant. Keep soil evenly moist rather than soggy, and mulch if you want to smooth out swings between waterings. Two common slip-ups are easy to fix. First, planting into true summer heat often yields tougher, more bitter leaves, so favor spring and fall windows, and lean on afternoon shade when warm weather lingers. Second, crowding seedlings invites legginess and pests. Hold that 8 to 12-inch spacing and thin early, rather than regretting it later. Harvest is forgiving and continuous. Pick outer leaves as you need them and let the center keep producing. If a light frost brushes the bed, don't panic. Many gardeners find kale even sweeter afterward. For storage, rinse, spin, or pat dry and refrigerate. It holds nicely short term, so you can harvest a generous bowl and work through it over the week. Bottom line, in a shady garden, kale behaves like the reliable cool season anchor, content with part shade, happier out of the heat, and productive over a long window when given space, steady moisture, and sensible timing. Mint is tailor-made for tricky light, happy in full sun but perfectly content in partial shade, where 3 or more hours of light keeps it vigorous without stress. That makes it a natural fit for the edges of a bed, along a fence, or anywhere your brighter crops would sulk. Because it's a hardy perennial, you can plant early and expect it to return, giving that shadier corner a reliable, fragrant workhorse year after year. Set plants about 18 inches apart and let them knit into a leafy patch you can harvest from constantly. Once established, you can shear stems and they'll rebound quickly. Most gardeners end up doing multiple cutbacks through the season. Keep the soil on the richer side and consistently moist, but never soggy. Mint likes water, not wet feet. Good drainage is your best friend for clean, healthy growth. Two common mistakes that are easy to dodge. First, letting mint loose in open soil, and then being shocked when it wanders everywhere. The fix is simple. Grow in containers, window boxes, or sink a barrier to corral the roots. Second, loving it to death with water. If the pot saucer is always full or the bed stays sodden, you're inviting disease. Water regularly, then let excess drain. Aim for moist, well-drained, not swampy. Harvest is straightforward. Snip sprigs or cut stems just before flowering for peak flavor. If you do see buds, a quick trim resets the plant and sends up another flush of tender growth. For short-term storage, wrap cut mint in a damp paper towel and tuck it into a loose bag in the refrigerator. It stays perky for a few days. For longer keeping, dry bunches in a well-ventilated spot or freeze leaves, whole or chopped, to capture that bright, clean aroma. In a shady garden plan, mint plays several roles at once. Dependable culinary herb, fragrant filler, and low-stress perennial anchor. Give it those few hours of light, decent soil, and a sensible boundary, and it will repay you with non-stop harvests. Tea, sauces, salads, desserts, and those little finishing touches that make a plate feel fresh. Keep the water balanced, the roots contained, and the shears handy. That's mint in the shade. Easy, generous, and endlessly useful. Cauliflower is a calm and steady crop that enjoys the cooler comfort of a part-shade bed. In softer light, the plants grow evenly, and the heads stay firm and pale instead of spreading open too fast. The key is a balanced rhythm of moisture and nutrients, not big swings that confuse the plant. In this kind of setting, cauliflower feels right at home. It grows slower, but more gracefully, building those dense, snowy heads that look like sculpture in the garden. When the weather turns warm, the shaded spot helps it stay composed instead of stressed. The payoff is a clean, crisp harvest that feels like a reward for patience. Cauliflower doesn't need constant attention. It just needs a calm corner where light stays gentle and the soil holds steady. It's one of those crops that remind you shade can be a strength, not a setback. Brussels sprouts are the quiet, patient workers of the garden. They move at their own pace, stacking rows of tiny green buttons up tall stems while the rest of the bed rushes ahead. Partial shade keeps them cool and collected during the long growing stretch. In that softer light, the sprouts stay tight and neat instead of turning leafy or loose. It's a slow process, but every week brings a little more weight to the stalk. When the air cools, the flavor sweetens and the color deepens, making each sprout feel like a small victory. There's something satisfying about watching them rise quietly, unbothered by harsh light or heat. They ask for time, not supervision, and reward it with an abundant, compact harvest that makes the shady corner feel unexpectedly proud. Short carrots were made for shaded beds. Instead of pushing deep into the soil, they stay small, round, and crisp, turning a low-light space into a steady supply of sweet, colorful roots. In the shade, the soil stays cooler and the flavor mellows out beautifully. The greens stay lush and the roots develop at an easy pace without rushing to finish. Their small size also makes them a perfect fit for containers, grow bags, or raised beds that get only a few hours of light each day. Pulling them feels like uncovering little treasures in the soil. Every handful comes up smooth and bright, proof that not every carrot needs the spotlight. In a shaded bed, these compact roots remind you that quiet spaces can still deliver color, flavor, and satisfaction. Turnips handle the shade with quiet confidence. They grow calmly and evenly, forming smooth, pale bulbs beneath a canopy of soft green leaves. In partial shade, the pace slows just enough to make the roots sweeter and the greens more tender. The result is a plant that feels balanced and reliable, producing food even when light is limited. Each bulb brings a pleasant crunch and a mild, earthy flavor that fits easily into soups, roasts, or simple sautés. The greens, meanwhile, stay lush and fresh, ready to pick at any time. Turnips are one of those crops that never make a fuss. Give them a calm space, steady moisture, and a little patience, and they'll fill that shady patch with quiet, dependable abundance. Thanks for sticking with me through the entire video. If you found this helpful, give it a like, subscribe for more gardening tips, and check out our other videos on growing a better garden.